Training to failure has a time and a place. Assuming it's timed properly, failure training can be a useful tool for increasing strength and muscle mass. On the other hand, if training to failure is overutilized or mistimed intra-session or during your training week, then you run the risk of missing out on gains in a couple of ways. First, training to failure constantly, especially on compound exercises, is very taxing on the nervous system and muscles. Because of the amount of exertion and discomfort you'll have from going all out all the time, adherence to a training program can become challenging, as training like this can feel daunting and potentially lead to overtraining if continued for a long enough period. Additionally, the amount of total volume you'll be able to accumulate intra-session and throughout the week will be lower if you take all or most of your sets to failure because of the increased demand on your muscles and time it takes to recover from all that muscle damage compared to training prior to failure. So between the potential drop in consistency and the amount of total volume and frequency lost as a result of longer recovery needed, training to failure all of the time is not ideal if your goal is increasing strength or hypertrophy. Now, if you're strategic about when to apply failure training, it can be very useful by giving you a better understanding of your true 1 rep max and whether or not you're accurate at gauging your RPE or rating of perceived exertion. For hypertrophy, training to failure can help with the accrual of even more muscle damage, mechanical tension, and metabolic stress, which is paramount for building muscle. There are two scenarios where training to failure would be most useful. The first is when you are performing single joint isolation exercises like a bicep curl or a lateral raise towards the end of the session when they are the last exercise for a given muscle group. These types of exercises, unlike compound exercises, are less consequential when going to failure because they don't tax the nervous system as much compared to failure on a bigger lift like a squat or a pull-up. The other scenario where training to failure would be useful is when performing compound exercises or single joint exercises at the end of the week, where you'll likely have your longest training break. For example, if you train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, keeping your sets to failure would be better utilized towards the end of your Friday session because you have about 72 hours to recover before your next session. This way, when you start again on Monday, the after effects of going all out will likely have dissipated entirely, or at least be diminished enough to where it won't affect your training the following week. So how far from failure can you train while continuing to make progress? That answer will depend on how you would like to train and your goals. Fortunately, research has shown that training shy of failure versus always training to failure produces just as good, if not greater, gains in strength and hypertrophy. An easy rule of thumb based on literature is to keep your sets anywhere from 1 to 5 reps in reserve. What's important is not that you identify precisely how far you can train from failure and always do that. Rather, you should keep things appropriately shy of failure to the point where it doesn't negatively impact your total volume, weekly frequency, overall fatigue, and motivation to train. If training with 5 reps left makes you feel like you aren't training hard enough, then maybe adjust your sets to 2 to 3 reps in reserve if that gives you more satisfaction. A simple change like that can make a huge difference in terms of adherence without leaving any gains on the table.